Who's your emergency contact? Who should be notified in case of death? Welcome to the USP, where I spent the last 2+ decades of my life. I just want to share one more story about my friend Pui that passed away a couple weeks ago. As I shared with you, he ended up getting into a domestic dispute with his girl, took her hostage. So that's the story that I was told. And the Alaska PD was called and they ended up taking his life. You know, I've shared with you guys, I have a lot of friends that I was doing time with, at least 20 of them that I can count, that never made it out of the penitentiary. But I also have, a few that came home and one thing or another end up going back or end up dying. Some of them wasn't so dramatic as far as like getting off by the police, but my homie C-Nut, he died of cancer after 6 months he was out, got colon cancer, passed away. I went to a funeral, the homie Faylo from Glendale, TC. He died of health complications. And just this last week, I had a little homie that passed away. Me and his brother used to run around together, but his brother was killed back in 1995. And his little brother, his name is Peter, he was about 39, and he died of health complications. So there's been a lot of funerals since I've been home, and there was more that I couldn't make it, just like this one with my friend Pui. They called me to come, if I can fly out to Alaska, but I can't leave the States right now, so I'm not able to go. But Pui, he wasn't a very big Samoan. He was maybe 5'8", 5'9", a little wide, about 230, strong as shit, right? Strong as shit. But, being Samoan, most Samoans, they come plus size. They're usually around 6 foot, 260 and bigger. Out here in Utah, there's a lot of Tongans and Samoan. So, I grew up with them. I got to know a lot of them. I know half of them throughout the valley, from every neighborhood, practically. At least all the ones that are my age, 45 and up. But when I got there to Atwater, getting to know Pui, I found out he had a little man complex, right? I don't understand. I mean, he's bigger than me, way bigger than me, twice my size, but he's only like 5'9", maybe, right? So, and I think he's like one of the smallest one in his family as far as Samoans go. But yeah, I hooked up with his girl named Nicole, the one I mentioned earlier in the last episode, the one that he told that he was coming home and she had to send him money for a plane ticket and clothes and all the rest, right? Well, when he started riding her, he had told her he was about 6'2", 260, and all the rest. So when she wanted pictures from him, he would go and rally up all the homies that were shorter than him, right? He would get all the homies that were shorter than him. They would get in a group picture so he could stand behind them, because a lot of the Asian homies are short. But some of the Asian homies over there, they're chunky, because they work out and all that stuff. So some of them, like, besides the size difference, a lot of the Asians, Samoans, Tongans, we have similar features. Our skin tone. I have curly hair when I used to be able to grow it out, right? But, so he would tell her that he was 6'2", 200-something pounds, and he would go and take pictures with all the short homies, and he would send it to her. And for me, I just, I didn't understand it, but everybody's got their game. The one thing that you hear a lot about in the penitentiary is these dudes riding girls, and running game, I guess. Every game is different, whatever. And I was never into that. For me, when I got locked up, I wasn't really interested in writing anybody or anything like that because I didn't want the headache, and I didn't want to have to worry about somebody being out here. But also, I didn't really have the time for that because I wanted to just focus, my energy in the places that I was at, trying to survive and not deal with all the different drama. But along came, my wife. She started writing me in 2005, and we ended up being together in 2009. And as much as I didn't want her to wait all them years for me, I'm grateful that she did. But I do say that it's a unique experience. Sometimes you have dudes in there that are sincere about the way they feel about the people out here. But more times than not, it's just, it's just a way to do time, right? But, like I said, I was hoping that one of these days, because when I got out, Pui was still in jail. He went back to jail for a body. He had a confrontation inside a club, and the other dude got killed. And at the time I was coming home, at the time that I heard about it, around 2018, homie Eddie was telling me he was facing about 40 years. And then, we forgot about that conversation, and I come to find out that they had dropped it from first class to manslaughter. And he only ended up doing 8 years and was out for a few months, before this incident happened. In there you build relationships in there that get solidified real quick. You got road dogs out here that you ride with, that you put in work with, and, those relationships are solid. But being out here, you probably had years to get to know these guys and all the rest of it. When their relationship form a little bit faster and a little more deeper because you're never not around them, especially if you live in the same unit. Me and Pui lived in the same unit. So every morning at 6 o'clock, doors open, we're all outside. None of us sleep in. Like I told you guys, I've never taken a nap in a penitentiary. Not even when I was in the smooth or when I was in the shoe. In the smooth program, it's just like the shoes, lockdown, 23-1. But I have my program set. And the reason I have my program set is because when I do get released from the smooth or get released from the shoe, I didn't want that to affect my sleeping pattern, because in a penitentiary, man, you never know what's going to happen. You could be a very respectful individual. You can always do the right thing, but there's nobody in the penitentiary that's not affiliated. When you come in, everything gets divided or split up in race. If you're white, you're running with the whites. If you're black, you're running with the blacks. If you're Asian, you're running with the Asian, so on and so forth. Then after that, it gets broke down into the gangs. The whites run white, but there's independent whites, there's different skinhead whites, there's regional white. If you're from Washington, if you're from Texas, if you're from North Carolina or wherever, everything gets broken down. And the reason everything gets broken down is because, when something happens, like one of your people fucked up, like even with us, with the Asians, we come in, the Asian Islanders, there's Tongan, there's Samoans, there's Hawaiians, there's Laos, there's Vietnamese, there's Chinese, right? But if somebody fucked up, or is fucked up, and he's Chinese, then the Chinese homie is on the front line to go deal with that. If it's a Cambodian homie, it would be me or some of my other Cambodian homies that we have to go deal with it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I can't go smash a Vietnamese dude or a Hawaiian dude or anything like that. But we always want to give everybody an opportunity to take care of their own. Even though we're one car, there's still like, if a Cambodian dude comes on the yard and he's fucked up, I would feel better that if it was me or one of my Cambodian homies that went and smashed him instead of just letting anybody smash him. And also, it speaks volume that you want to take care of that. Just like when there's a beef between two different cars or whatever, and somebody, in every confrontation, there's always somebody that's at fault. And to keep the car from crashing, the person that's at fault's got to get dealt with. And if it's a conflict between the whites or the blacks, the whites not going to allow the black dudes to smash their homie. They're going to take it upon themselves to do that. So it's understood that, whoever comes in, regardless of what car you run into, if you're a black but you don't run with a gang, but you're from the Midwest, or you're from Texas, or you're from Florida, well, the Florida or Texas or Midwest homie's gonna have to deal with you. That's just the rules that has been established, and that's the rule that we abide by. So with Pui, we had this one incident where this is when I was there, when I first got there. They had this Samoan dude come in. Big old Samoan dude, they put him in Pui's celly. So one day, Pui comes over to me and he's like, "Hey man, check this out." The dude's out at the yard. Me and Pui's in the unit at the time. And he pulls out this paper. He goes, "Man, read this." And I read it, and it says, that the dude cooperated. I'm like, "What?" So I asked Pui, like, "Hey, how did you get this fucking paper?" He's like, "The motherfucker gave it to me. He showed it to me." I was like, "What?" When you go in, you have 30 to 60 days, depending on what car or what group you run into, or you're running with, to produce the paperwork. Because your paperwork is your player's card. If you don't check out, you got to check in. So, but this dude coming from Hawaii, this Samoan dude coming from Hawaii, he didn't really think anything of it because, and I know a lot of the Hawaiians might not like this, but a lot of them dudes out there that's fighting their case out that come from Hawaii, a lot of them were fucked up. And they don't get punished over there in the county or wherever, MDC, wherever they're being held in Hawaii. They can be testifying against somebody and everybody in the block knows it and nothing happens to them, right? So they come into the feds with that mentality that, yeah, I told, so did everybody else in Hawaii. But, it's normal. So when dude came and Pui asking for the paperwork, he's like, "Yeah, right here." He had no qualms about, no worries about that being a fucking rat, right? But like I said, in every car, there's always a change of command. There's always somebody that gets the final say. Like, you can't really just take it upon yourself to move on somebody without it being sanctioned, And not just to keep people from just beating up somebody because they don't like them or whatever, or because they're jealous or envious. And, it just keeps the peace. So Pui brings it to everybody else, the other Samoans that was on the yard, because the dude that came, even though he was from Hawaii, he's still Samoan. So he brought it to the yard to the Samoan dude, and Samoan dude at the time was Eki. He got deported to New Zealand. So, me, I fought with Pui, so I'm waiting to see. I'm in the unit. I'm watching dude, and I got my thing on me because we got to put in the work, right? So 3 of these Samoan dudes, they come in. 3 other Samoan dudes come in, and they go into the cell. And I'm standing outside the door by my table because our table is right in front of Pui's cell. So Pui and 3 other Samoans, there's 4 of them plus the rat, they're in the cell. And I'm waiting for the shit to jump off. Right? So when the door opens, they all come out. And the Samoan dude come out too. And I'm looking at Pui. I'm like, what's up? Just give him that look. I didn't say nothing, but just give him that look like, what are we doing? When are we doing it, right? And so Pui comes and pulls me over. He's like, man, that dude just want to run him up. I said, what do you mean he just want to run him up? I just want to make him check in. I said, why they ain't smashing him? He goes, man, because, when I got to Atwater, like I said, when I first got to Atwater, the politics wasn't as, maybe I can say it differently. Like the line wasn't pushed as hard as we end up pushing it, a few months later. Like I said, they had the older ones over there, and a lot of these people, they get comfortable on the yards that they're at. They got the best job, they work in commissary, or they got grade 1 where they're making a couple $100 a month, but they're comfortable. They got their own cell. They just have, they're in their groove. As far as doing time, they're able to be really comfortable and they don't want to disrupt that. But at the same time, they also understand that we can't just allow anybody and everybody on the compound with us. So the older guys, unless it was just something that was outlandish or whatever, they opt out as just to send the guy up, just to make him go check in instead of smashing him, right? And at this time, I was the new guy. I was just on a compound, and I've shared the story with you guys that, a lot of them dudes wasn't feeling me anyway, just because of the stuff that I've been doing prior to getting to Atwater that had to do with some of their homies. But in every single one of those incidents, I was in the right. There's nobody that's ever met me that's ever said that I'm out there starting shit or whatever. But at the same time, everybody that's ever met me is just going to tell you that I've always handled my business when it needs to be handled. But, me and Pui kicked it all the time over there. And there were some things that we didn't agree with that transpired on the compound as far as how these guys chose to deal with certain situation. But at the end of the day, they dealt with it, And yeah, I can make you guys, pretend that it's always smash. It's always, on 10. But the truth is not. But it ended up being like that with us. After a couple of years I was there, like I said, some of the older guys moved out. Some of the other people got demoted. Other people, then we started getting people that had the same mindset that, nobody's going to be walking away from this incident. Like, if you're foul and you're fucked up, you're going to get handled, And, yeah, we had a lot of fun, me and Pui. Every day was the same routine, 6 o'clock. We run out there, go find something to get into. Like I said, at the time, before they killed the police, wine was plentiful, But if it wasn't wine, there's always something There's always something to smoke. And I can honestly say that when I was in that water for I was there for 7 years, but Pui was there till about, he was there with me all the way till about 2000. I know I said in the other episode that he might have went home 2013, but I think he was there with me all the way till right before I got shipped out, right before the riot. So at least between almost closer to 2014, And I can only say that every day, anytime I drank, he drank. Anytime I smoked, he smoked. We lived in the same unit. We functioned on the yard together. When I go play handball, I let him be my handball player because he's not very good at handball, but he likes to play, but nobody wants to pick him. But he'd be my handball player and we run the court. Because really, when it comes to handball, I just need somebody just to catch the back, Other than that, I can pretty much handle the rest. But life is real, man. One day you're here, the next you might not be. And it's unfortunate that, these things has happened. But I hope he's in a better place. And for the rest of us, I hope you guys recognize how short life is, how fleeting it is. Even though, the last 24 years that I spent in there seemed like forever, but looking back now, it was like a blink of an eye, And life ain't easy for most of us, Outside the 10% or the 1%, the rest of us, we're just grinding and trying to make it, man. But, enjoy it. Enjoy your freedom. Enjoy your life. Enjoy the things that you have. Don't worry about too much of the things that you don't, but be grateful for the things that you do have. And you can find joy and pleasure in some of the simplest things. I live a simple life, man. I come home, I go to work here in my studio. I spend most of my day over here, between 6 to 10 hours, depending on the day. And after this, I go straight home. I go home to my wife and I go home to my dogs. And I'm perfectly happy. I live a peaceful life. And I just want that for the rest of you guys out there. I know it ain't easy, but find peace and gratitude in the things that you do have. And to the homie, I want to miss you. And like I said, man, I really do hope there's a heaven for a G. Welcome to the USP.